Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
A couple of weeks ago, when we set out to Norway land, as we call it on this show, we had the big Storm Eunice in the UK, which wreaked absolute havoc. Actually, we lost a few fence panels, but we were fairly sheltered where we live. But along the paths that I'm now beginning to walk once more since returning home, I'm noticing trees that have just gone. Trees that you look at, like this one I'm approaching here, thinking, how did that go? That looks like such a solid tree with 100+ years of history behind it. And there's a kind of a melancholic thing, isn't there, when you see a tree that's just gone in the winds. I mean, that storm, to take this tree, I mean, there's no leaves on it, so anyway, look, let me get a picture for you, because it's across the path that I'm walking, and I'm not sure if somebody's been along and made the path passable. It looks perhaps that they have, but look at this. It's majestic, this tree. It's sad to see, but that storm was so vicious. Right, X100V I've got with me today, and shutter speed 160th, f5.6, ISO 160. I'm gonna get closer to the tree as well, making these sketchbook images so you can see just how wild that storm must have been to have taken a tree like this. It just literally ripped it from the ground. Extraordinary. Right. It was a proper challenge last week to try and get the tone right, I think, because I felt I had to say something about what was happening in Ukraine on this show anyway, it being a programme about feelings and emotion. I just thought it felt entirely appropriate to recognise a world event that has had whole swathes of us seemingly forget about the C word. You know, the other night we went an entire peak evening news bulletin, I swear, without one mention of the pandemic, although I know that's not the case everywhere, far from it. And I'll read some of your emails and thoughts about that topic today, though it's not the theme of today's show, and it seems broadly you seem to find the tone works. Well, almost everyone. I shall reveal later. But I'm working on another photographic and I suppose cross arts theme at the moment, which you'll not be a stranger to. The theme of how this wonderful thing that we do, making pictures, for a not insignificant number of you and us, is a very real mental lifeline. I'm hoping to talk to Adam, who wrote that extraordinary letter to us a couple of weeks ago, the one featured on Joel Meyrowitz's edition, about how photography has helped him battle his PTSD. And those 4 letters are usually linked with a kind of trauma associated with, say, the battlefield or working in highly stressed scenarios. And this one is a slightly different story, the situation that is. Although it's not long back that I heard from an Irish A&E doctor who makes pictures with his iPhone of the flowers at patients' bedsides as a way to connect with people who are otherwise fearful of his white coat. There's Ian MacDonald, of course, the Canadian photographer who found street photography was the perfect mental tonic after years of working as a paramedic. And of course our friend John Manell, the portrait per day man who makes street portraits to counter extreme anxiety and depression. There's no doubt in my mind of the power of art to heal. And during the week I was doing some research about this subject, as it's something I'm trying to put together as a talk as well as an edition. And I happened across a comedian in America who appeared on one of the, or if not the, largest TV shows in the US definitely, possibly the world when you think of the sheer audience, America's Got Talent, or AGT as it's called. His name is Kevin Schwartz, And he's not a photographer, obviously, he's a comedian, but he is an artist, because I always think of comedy as a real form of art. And the reason for my mention is that his story was about comedy and the stage giving him a reason, aged 49, to get out of his house and take back control of his life, where following college he'd become agoraphobic. And of course, for many people, this could be, I suppose, comedy could be an extreme version of finding the confidence to be outside and with people again. In fact, he says, instead of watching other people live, I want to live. He said that on the television programme, on the interview part. And isn't that the power of art? It's an invisible super strength, isn't it? I'm hoping, well, we're talking about it anyway, that Kevin may just come on to the show and share that feeling and how he worked with art and comedy in his case to discover himself once more and give himself that sort of invisible superpower within. So this is, it's kind of my way of inviting you to take part in that edition coming up. Maybe you'd like to talk with me, or perhaps send in a letter that we can read out on that show, or a DM, or something that addresses the mental tonic that is art, and by extension for us usually is photography. On the show today, an American photographer whose portraits online look like an A to Z of the most fascinating people you could possibly meet, who could probably fill a stadium with pages of their life stories. And having said that, though, my guest's bio starts with the words, born into southern poverty and abuse, joined the Navy, saw the world. Quite the story itself. Daniel Bergeron.
Today on the Photowalk.
I would just call friends or call neighbors and just tell people, just show up, camera ready, and I'm going to figure it out as fast, how to photograph you as fast as I can.
Stories of life told by photographers. Today, those stories come from Daniel Bergeron and you. It's a special and unique podcast made out on location. Me with my camera, you with yours, earbuds in, a flask of coffee, a packet of my favourite Garibaldis, and a mailbag of letters as we walk. These photo walks are inspired from and by those letters and the pictures you send in of where you've been walking and your thoughts on why photography means so much to you. Send those thoughts to studio@photographydaily.show and inspire a worldwide community of photographers, no matter what interest, genre or skill level. So, what's in a mailbag? Well, I'll tell you in a moment, after I show my sincere thanks to mpb.com for sponsoring this time that we spend walking together. mpb.com is the #1 company in the UK, the US and Europe, with bases in Brighton, Brooklyn and Berlin. You knew that when it comes to buying and selling and trading used camera kit online. And they're a company I use personally. They help photographers like me and like you to buy and trade and sell our kit online. And that's everything from digital cameras to lenses to bags to sound kit and all the stuff of creativity we need to help us tell our special stories. Sustainability being very important too these days. You'll also be part of the very important. How many veries can I do? Circular economy. So it's a safe place to do business with guarantees upon what you buy and product specialists who are photographers and creators themselves, and they've been answering questions that you send in. And today one comes from Paul Beppy, who says, I hear about the insides of lenses suffering from a fungus, and that's one thing you look for when you sell or buy a lens. But how can I stop that happening from my gear in the first place? From MPB, Paul, since fungus thrives in dark, moist areas, it's advised, especially if you're not going to use them for a long time, to store your lenses in see-through containers with silica gel packets. Storing the lenses in this way will help prevent fungus growth. Silica gel packets absorb moisture, while the see-through container allows light inside that can kill fungus. Send your questions to our mail address, studio@photographydaily.show. Sell the kit you're not using, trade it in for the stuff you need to create. Buy used, spend less, and get more at mpb.com. Our patrons also keep these boots walking, cue the song, and we'll hear from some of them later on. Today, the creatures that attack you on your photo walks. The ones that sting and buzz and growl, with a little help too from the fine art photographer David Yarrow. Also, finding inspiration from places you never thought possible. A brilliant tip-off for a site to go and devour. I warn you now, you will be ages looking at this website when I've shared it with you. And who inspires you as a photographer? There's feedback from last week's show and a few words from the photographers in Ukraine who were on it. And then photographing a natural phenomena that demands you to trust the ice won't break beneath your feet. Shall we walk then? Checklist out. Coffee and Garibaldi's. Packed. Check. Boots on and laced. Check. Walking trousers or shorts. Long socks for those who walk amongst the rattlesnakes, scorpions, ticks, and we'll talk about that in a while. Check. Spare batteries. Check. Fillmore cards. Check. Earbuds in. Check. Lens caps off. Let's walk. Thank you for the letters that you send in, for your comments on the website show pages, our Instagram, and your picture stories in the Facebook group. I love to read your thoughts, which sometimes I know are very personal stories. So it's it's a deep and genuine privilege that you feel you're in a safe place to share. So please keep sending them in to studio@photographydaily.show. That's the email address, studio@photographydaily.show. Right, let's dive into your letters. Letters, Neil, you just said an email address. I know, but I like to talk analog. You know me. And I'm starting this week by looking over my shoulder, because I'm really not sure what's lurking in the hedgerow. Well, I actually am, but this letter, let me read it. It's from Robert. Well, I did write to Robert to say, how do I pronounce your surname? And because I said, I think I'm turning it quite continental. Even though Robert's in America land, I went very French with it. Robert Demers. Demers. I like Demers. Quite happy to have discovered the Photography Daily podcast, he says. Quite. Only quite. Hold back the enthusiasm, Robert. Good to find a photography podcast that speaks more about the human connection to image making, less about the gear, f-stops, megapixels, and the production quality is stellar. Nice set of pipes. Oh, Robert, I bet you say that to all the podcasters. I am most intrigued, however, that you never make mention of the presence of pests on your woodland photo walks. Roaming the woods of Maine in the US in my youth, I was sure to host a number of critters, from black flies to mosquitoes and the king of parasites, the tick. Now, here in my Sonoran desert homeland of Tucson, Arizona, is it Tucson or Tucson? I don't know, Neil, it depends where you come from. Are you north or south? Tucson. We have to be vigilant about the multitude of hazards from, now check this list. Jumping cholla. I looked up, it's spelled Cholla, but I just hear it said as cholla. I looked it up, it's a barbed cactus that easily attaches to you. And, well, so easily that they actually look like they jump. Hence the name, jumping cholla. And they're very painful too, apparently. Then he says we have rattlesnakes. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, I read it as Gila monsters, but it's a Gila monster, isn't it? Which, again, I had to look up. The only venomous lizard in the States, and pretty grumpy by the looks of it. I saw one bite a TV presenter on YouTube, and he did not look happy. Well, actually, they both didn't look happy. We have, says Robert, Africanized bees. God, dear. I looked these up. I had to look all these critters up because by now you're gathering that we don't live with anything quite like this. But these things, they're as big as small dessert plates. Huge. I mean, these things would need air traffic control clearance to land. They look vicious. Tarantula hawks. Second most painful sting in the world. Again, I had to look this one up as a pattern forming, Neil, because I was thinking tarantula hawks. I thought, oh, that sounds like a hawk with maybe fluffy looking legs or something. Turns out they're huge wasps the size of a small car that can, they can attack and eat tarantulas. That's how big these things are. And there's more Robert has to deal with, like the javelina. So, did you look it up, Neil? Yes, again, I looked this up. And the film I saw when I looked it up on YouTube, the encyclopedia, of course, to my knowledge these days, I saw, I saw a TV news channel called K-Gun, which raised my eyebrows. It mentioned a woman out walking on a golf course with her 2 dogs, attacked by these small wild boar, javelinas. Killed the dog, injured the second badly, and gave her some nasty wounds too. And she was walking on a golf course. Anyway, as Robert says, indeed, it seems everything out here is to poke, bite and poison you. The upside being, is there an upside? The need to be in the moment on walkabouts. What pesters you in your woodland walks, Neil? Well, I'm on a woodland walk today. I'm along a path next to a woods anyway. But I'd say if this were a competition, Robert, I can safely say I've just lost. In 285 episodes, honestly, I gave this a thought and noted down a few things that I've met. Not all photo walks, granted, in that 285, but a fair few. I've stumbled on one bee's nest, met a grumpy bloke who didn't like me talking into my microphone because he was sleeping on his barge. He had something to say to me. I must dig that out, actually, because I kept the recording going. I'm sure I kept it. There was an exchange between us. A very yappy Jack Russell and a couple who were, let's just say studying nature with minimum clothing. But you probably wouldn't refer to that as a pest. That is how dangerous my photo walks have been so far. This summer, though, we apparently have lots of wasps on the way for a reason I can't quite remember. I saw it on the news. Let's just hope that they aren't tarantula hawks. Lastly, says our friend Robert, is not the Garibaldi the inspiration for the Pop-Tart? Oh, I don't think so. No. Far from it. No. Do come and see us in the great Sonoran Desert. As scary as it may seem, the landscape is magnificent. Soon I will entice you with some of my landscape images. I'm looking forward to it already, after I've bought a suit of armour. I probably need to talk with more photographers who make pictures of these angry critters or dangerous creatures. But I do remember talking in episode 203 with a fine art photographer, David Yarrow, about coming to face to face, I suppose, with on his photographic trips with bears. And in his case, or this case, the most dangerous of them all, the rather humorless polar bear.
I was on a tiny fishing boat, and it's all about working with the best guides, and I was working with the lead guide up there, and he's never known of a polar bear from land up there to try and jump from his land position over steel bars to try and get into a boat. And he's also managing the engine, so that if any stage it looks like his behavior
he's off.
And the bear's mother was behind him, so the bear was never going to need his mother. So I'm okay with that. There are 2 types of bear encounters, right? There's a bear encounter that is in the woods in the spring or the autumn, where it's unexpected. You turn around a corner and there's a big bear in the woods that might not have eaten, that might be tired, might be shocked by human presence. I would never ever even consider remotely doing that, or having the possibility of that happening. Every bear encounter I have is in the fishing season, where they're eating so many fish that they don't give a damn about you, and they know your presence, that you're not surprising them.
The voice of David Yarrow. I tell you what, Robert, David, you two should get together and you can compare the things you meet on your photo walks. Quick mention for the 365s, which are simply fantastic. studio@photographydaily.show is the email address to send your pictures to for the Community 365, which is on our website, photographydaily.show, which is it's a great way to feel part of a 365. If the idea of having to make an image every single day, I'm just stooping under another tree that it's not quite as large and magnificent as the large one, but it's gone across the path. Yeah, so if you're a little bit stressed about making an image every single day for a 365, this is a way to take part in one and be amongst a community of friends that are sending some fantastic pictures in. What did we have this week? We had John Miller's new Brighton lighthouse. There is something about lighthouses that I'm really fascinated about. There's a lighthouse in Norway land that I'd like to go back to. It's you can stay in it on an island. You look after the lighthouse for the week, which is my idea of bliss. That looks fantastic. I'd like to. I have this sort of fantasy of having a writing bolt hole, and a lighthouse would be one of those. Probably not the lighthouse that was featured in John Carpenter's film The Fog. I'm not quite so sure I'd like that one, but otherwise. And Paul Hornsby on Tuesday, the black and white, gorgeous black and white of Afon Hepst in South Wales, or Waterfall Country as it's known. Make sure you go and see those and the others. As I say, it's very, I feel almost, it doesn't feel right to pick a couple out because they're all fantastic, but I'm going to start picking more out to tell you about, because I've been remiss on that over the last month or so. So yes, go see them. They're on the website photographydaily.show. Look for the tab that says Community 365 and send yours in, please. 2,000 pixels on the wide side to the email address that I repeat over and over as I walk the paths during these photo walks. We're back on critters for this next letter. That wasn't the theme of today's show at all, but I seem to have found lots of critter pieces today, but not the dangerous variety this time. This letter's all about butterflies and moths and dragonflies, although actually I'm thinking about the chrysalis now in Silence of the Lambs, because I watched it the other night. It was a moth chrysalis, wasn't it? I think so. And now I'm thinking of butterflies and moths and things. That film comes to mind. What's that great line at the end? Well, Clarice, I have to go now. I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. I don't do it any justice, do I? But our Jack asked actually whether he could watch Silence of the Lambs. He's 14 this month, but I still think it's a tad early. But it is one of the most incredible pieces of acting by two absolute masters, Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins. Fabulous acting. Anyway, here's a letter from Ross Brocklesby, and I think this may have you reaching for a lens that I bet 99.9999 recurring percent of the time sits in a cupboard shouting, "Please, bring me out. Use me. Go on. You know you want to." Ross writes, "I'm new to the podcast, and to be honest, I don't know how on earth I've not come across it before. Well, you're here now, and that's what matters, Ross. Started listening about 4 weeks ago, and I'm currently working my way through the podcast back catalogue. That should keep you busy. I was a landscape photographer primarily until lockdown hit. And then I started taking photo walks in my local area, and to my amazement discovered so much wildlife I'd never really seen before. We'd probably seen it, but you didn't appreciate it by the sounds of it. I think that's a familiar story, isn't it? With anybody that goes out with a camera and starts seeing things. I rushed out, bought myself a macro lens, and started to photograph insects and butterflies, dragonfly, anything really. I wanted to show others around me that, if you look, and I mean really look, you'll see the glorious sights that nature has to offer. My macro lens goes on now in March and comes off in October, and it amazes me to see the finer details of nature. Macro photography, says Ross, often gets overlooked because of how technically demanding it can be working with such small focal planes. It can be so easy to miss the shot and takes a lot of patience and knowing your subject. Butterfly, for example, do not sit still in daylight hours, but if you catch them at dawn or dusk, you'll know that once they settle, they don't move until the next day. Just bits I've picked up along the way to help me capture some incredible wildlife the average person will probably never see. Ross, I had no idea about that fact. It doesn't sound very good for personal security, does it? And those people that waft along with nets trying to catch them. But you essentially have a very willing sitter, don't you, if they don't move? I feel my hobby, says Ross, is one of patience and perseverance, which ultimately pays off. Well, sometimes. Also worth mentioning that all my subjects are alive in their natural habitat and never disturbed. We macro and close-up photographers have a bad reputation due to some photographers' desire to kill and model insects or get really close-up images. But to me, that's too far. Just thought I'd mention it. Well, if you haven't seen Ross's pictures, because I originally got wind of this through the fabulous, wonderful Facebook group that we have for Photography Daily. We have a Facebook page, but we also have a group. And if you're made of the right stuff and you're wearing the right shoes, security lets you through and you join this amazing community of photographers that I feel it's a very safe place to be. And no questions too daft. I think that should be we have a set of rules for the group, but maybe that should be the one and only rule. No question too daft. Oh, and also when you post pictures, you do have to tell us a little bit about it. But I'll leave some links on the show page today, along with some of Ross's incredible pictures. I would be, if I didn't have my X100V with me, reaching for the macro already. Maybe one week on I do have a macro lens. I have my Canon one, and I have the 60mm one that pops onto my Fujifilm X-H1. So maybe I'll join you figuratively in going out in nature and just using my macro lens for the walk. But I gave Ross a quick call off the back of his letter because I was really taken by somebody who in lockdown found this sincere passion in making macro pictures. He had no idea that it was even an interest, and I thought that was fascinating. Dragonflies are gorgeous creatures, and he photographs those, but I couldn't believe that a dragonfly would stay still. Well, still enough for Ross's macro lens anyway, and focusing time, because they always seem to be the flittiest of flitty creatures in Flittyville to me.
They do, but you have to know which ones do. Like four-spotted, for example, they will sit still, but like your emperors, they will just keep going. But you have to know the diet, and you have to keep a watch when they're eating, they will settle. And I've photographed them eating other dragonflies. They're quite cannibalistic, which again, I didn't know that until I watched them eating their own kind. They are lively. See, all these names as well, I had no idea what they were called. Butterflies as well, had no idea. I'm just looking at them. That's a butterfly, that's a blue one, that's a green one. But like the names of them now, I've started to learn, like the hair streaks and whatnot. I just found it fascinating. I even joined the butterfly conservation group after a while just to see if I could do my bit to promote it.
What about when the winter comes?
So the winter time is hard,
right? Yeah.
Because there's very little wildlife.
But you've got spiders though, and we've had a march of things like false widows, haven't we?
Yeah. So the spiders are something I'd not taken an interest in up until just after Christmas. So I'm kind of still learning the ropes with those guys. Yeah. False widows and whatnot. I do have a few pictures. I'll be honest with the names of them. I'm not entirely sure. Again, it's another learning curve. Yeah. I tend to focus on one thing. So the first year were dragonflies. That was 2020, and then butterflies were last year. So this year I'm undecided, but I'm tending to verge towards like the crickets and grasshoppers. there's loads of different types, colours.
Good luck with that, because the crickets, now they don't stay still.
No, they don't, but there's a knack to them. If you're good at sneaking, you can kind of sneak up on them and surprise them. But yeah, again, they don't stay still, but it's just knowing what you're doing and approaching it. Every one of them's different. They all seem to have their own personalities and that kind of thing. You just pick up on it by sitting there for an hour or two just watching them. You're not just reeling off thousands of shots. You have got to look and take your time with it.
That's Ross Brocklesby. You never know when you post on the Facebook page or send a letter in, whether you may get a call. I enjoy that, talking to Ross. And I especially love his idea of finding something photographically out of the blue that entirely floats your creative boat, that changes, and it actually has for him, changed his life perspective as well. So thank you, Ross, for your time. And it's time for part one of my guest today, an American photographer whose portraits online look like an A to Z of the most fascinating people you could possibly ever meet. Who, as I said, could fill a stadium with pages of their life stories. Having said that, yes, my guest's bio starts with the words born into southern poverty and abuse, joined the Navy, saw the world. It is, as per the introduction and today's show, quite the story. This is Daniel Bergeron. The first words of a bio, particularly a photographer's, not always, but they cite a particular epiphany moment or maybe a character that delivered you to the world of picture making. Yours doesn't, though. Born into southern poverty and abuse, joined the Navy, which is a somewhat stark opener, but has it been something that was important to shape your life?
Certainly. Coming from the upbringing that I had, and for many people that end up in the military, it is an out. It's something, if you're stuck in a small town, there's no opportunities. There's very few people that you relate to on any level. And things not being so great on the home front, just constantly getting kicked in the head, and you just want to get out. And when you don't have the financial means, Uncle Sam will kick in and give you a skill and get you out there. And with the job that I had, I got to meet a lot of people on the ship, and came across the photographer's mate. From meeting the guys down in the photo lab, I got along with them and got turned on to having a camera. And it was also a little bit of a way to just hold on to people. And this was before our social media days.
But the photo lab bit came around because you worked as not so much a dentist, but what we would call a hygienist.
Yes, and that's it was something I had a knack for, and I worked under observation. I technically wasn't supposed to do the job, but we were on an aircraft carrier with 5,000 people and just a handful of doctors and or dentists. And they said, well, you're not getting sued, so work under observation. They gave me some test cases, and they saw that I could do the job and a steady hand. And for those unfamiliar with how the military works, there's the official way to do things, and then there's the behind the scenes. And in my case, there's only so many appointments in a day, and people want to look good before they pull into port. So they want an appointment, and it comes down to, well, hey, where do you work? Oh yeah, I'm in supply. I'll get you some boots. I'll get you flight deck boots, which were better than what we were issued. Or, I'll bring you something from Chief's Mess. And one day, Petter Saboman came out, and he's like, yeah, I'm down in the photo lab. I'll teach you how to print. And that started the ball rolling. Went down, and I got along with them. It was just a different mentality of people. And they were like, yeah, these are my people here. A little more artistic, less about just, hitting port and getting loaded. So I got along with them, and that's kind of just started hanging out in the photo lab on the ship.
So dentistry's loss is photography's gain. You could have ended up being a dentist, Daniel. So did it start in earnest following the Navy? As soon as you got back, was that it? Was that what you...
As soon as I got it, and I fell flat on my face. This was in right at 2000, had 2 jobs lined up.
Yeah.
One was from a .com that went belly up. And then the other, I had about 2 weeks of work. It was in a lab, but I was doing a lot of color printing.
Yeah.
And it was a school portrait, the picture day photographer, but it was a self-made operation. And I ran his lab. And this was in the film days, so a complete wet lab, package printers. I did everything except for lithos. He was better at it than me. But rolls and rolls and rolls of paper, just punching it out, color correction. I learned quite a bit, but after 2 weeks of work, he says, well, we're closing up shop for the summer. So I'll see, if you want a job, I'll see you in 4 months. and then I was just cut loose. So I went to an E6 lab, and that's where I actually found out about photo assisting. And then it really, it was a mix of survival and a mix of, I am going to do this no matter what. I'm going to do this.
You do say by way of persistence and the kindness shown by those who gave you a chance, you are where you are today. But you don't simply start making portraits of Michael Keaton, Glenn Close, Idris Elba, Elizabeth Moss, etc., et al. Most people have a 10-year overnight sensation story, don't they? Is yours similar?
Similar. I assisted for a good 13 years.
Right.
Assisting, teching, shooting small jobs. Catalog stuff here and there, catalog fashion. And then, but I would also just, if I had a time, and I managed to find where I'm, my studio is now. There's a place in LA called the Brewery Arts Compound, and it's an entire block. It's 300 some odd actual live workspaces, which you don't really, everything we find here in LA that's labeled as a live work is usually some rich person's, bougie loft. Whereas these are the real deal where you still build them out yourself. And the rent is affordable. So I managed to get into one old lease and had a studio to work out of. And it came down to where I would just call friends or call neighbors and just tell people, just show up, camera ready, and I'm going to figure it out as fast, how to photograph you as fast as I can. Wow. In time, I got the proverbial lucky break. So that goes to kindness of strangers. I came across just the right person, and I made we were at the National Documentary Association Awards, and happened to spot Werner Herzog from across the room. Yes. And I just, every time I would kill to shoot his portrait. That started the ball rolling for a project we did together called the IndieWire Influencers, where I basically shot portraits of various financiers. We photographed Kristen Bell because she kickstarted a movie. We got Guillermo del Toro. But mostly a lot of suits. And I went in, shot portraits. We did short interviews, bundled it. And then another much larger company came in and gave us a ton of money to do a panel discussion and a whole event at LA Film Fest. And based off the success of that, we're like, well, how can we grow this? And then that steamrolled into an Oscars project. Because I tell you, like the first few celebrity shoots I did, you run into the publicists, and they are the gatekeepers. They can make your life hell.
What do you like working with the publicists and the PR agents and the entourages that can sometimes come with these huge names that I see on your website?
The entourages generally aren't too bad. The best I've found is just to let them know that nothing is going to come back and bite them in the rear. That they're going to get. I make sure that a lot of my work is actually posted and if I'm on a location, I actually bring my work to put out there and I leave my book out so that they know what they're getting.
I've spoken to a fair few portrait photographers, as you might expect, and I'm always intrigued as to their approach in the studio. Are you a talker or a researcher, or are you? I remember reading a fascinating story about Joseph Karsh, who was always really quiet and quite intense in the studio. How are you?
A little more on the quiet side. To me, it's I plan everything in advance, and it's usually I'll kind of look them up. I guess a little more of a researcher. I'll just try to look at the structure of their face, and that's really. I've often told folks, like in my own end, it's there's no the soul of it or whatnot. It's to me in my own head, it's just math. I'm looking at the shape of their face and kind of doing an exploded diagram in my head of where the light needs to hit, where it needs to fall off according to the shape of their jaw, how much, shadow needs to fall underneath to shape their jaw. It's all math in here.
So it's a very technical procedure by the sound of it.
For me, in advance.
Yeah.
And I'll pre-light as much as I can in advance. And then after that, I try to work fast because I think one of the things I saw over the years as an assistant is there'll be people that just like, oh, I can't blow this, so I just need to make sure I get everything and just keep shooting.
Yeah.
And then your subject becomes camera aware. And once they tip that point, if you can't break it, you're done. And I've seen too many people over the years just push too long, and you get a camera aware subject, and it just becomes like a drawn out experience for everyone involved.
When they appear, obviously, everybody's very different. I saw Johnny Knoxville on there. I still chuckle whenever I think about Johnny Knoxville. So, he's a very playful subject. He's entirely different to somebody like Ralph Fiennes, for example.
But it's still, that individual, I think their individual personalities will come through on their own. Yeah. But in my own head, it's always just, it's math. It's just, this is how I want this light to hit. They'll give me what they want in the very short time, again, until they become camera aware.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of keep up a little bit of distraction with the look here and look here. I mean, playful you can deal with once in a blue moon. I can think of one person, and I've shot hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of celebrities at this point. I mean, I can think of one whose name I won't mention because, as you know, it's kiss of death, but who went out of his way to be a jerk. And he really was, from the get-go, was just trying. Yeah, everyone in the room picked up on it. And it was just, all right, we're going to go through these motions and do what I can. And, it was nothing personal. It was just, that's him to everyone.
Yeah. But how long are your sessions then? Because it's you say you work quite quickly. It's a math thing that you don't want it to become camera aware. So, I mean, this sounds like, a lot of people, when they shoot portraits that aren't celebs, for example, are aware of this kind of, I've got to elongate this slightly so that they feel they've got some value out of this. And there's a difference between value and getting great pictures.
Oftentimes I am rarely, I rarely get one person. It's usually, if I'm doing a celebrity shoot, it's in conjunction with the film that's going up for distribution.
Yeah.
So I'll have several cast members and a director. And for that, I am given generally about 15 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
Cradle to grave. Everything's set in place, but that's usually, get everyone together, and then one after the group shot or individuals. And so that's where I'm going to say that everything has to be in place and have fallback plans. If, one head goes down, have another on standby ready to swap right in its place. Everything's labeled, marked, to the T, so that if anything goes wrong, I can still get what I need within that allotted 15 minutes.
And Daniel Bergeron returns soon. Here's a new feature, sort of halfway through-ish, the show, to hear from our amazing patrons, some ideas that may just inspire you, I hope. Photography Daily has this incredible community of supporters called patrons who honestly keep me going. You really do, as it takes 3 production days a week now to produce this unique style of show. So my personal and very sincere thanks to you. Patrons are a part of our Photography Daily Patreon, which is an app and a website, which, we have over 100 additional shows and posts on it, which you can listen to through the Patreon app. Each month you can help support this show for the price of a cup of coffee or a roll of HP5, or you can help towards the cost of licensing or the music we use. Just a small donation. And let's meet a couple of patrons who have ideas to share. And we're going to start with Jason Fang in New Zealand. I'm not quite sure if land can be added to that one. New Zealand land, maybe. But I asked patrons for some thoughts on what's been inspiring them. And Jason wrote back, and you must note this name down. I'd like to share, he says, the work of a photographer and a writer called Craig Modd, M-O-D. He is an American photographer and writer based in Kamakura in Japan. He's been living in Japan for around about 20 years, and he writes and photographs his walks around Japan. His material actually touches on similar themes to Photography Daily, so mental health and engaging with people and doing the stuff that you enjoy that enlivens you. Craig also believes in the power of sound. Oh, we're singing for the same hymn book here, Jason. His version of Something or Nothing sketchbook photos are that he records binaural videos of simple everyday life. And if you're thinking, what's binaural? Well, I think with binaural you really have to listen with your headphones on at your computer or any other device for that matter, as long as you've got stereo sound. And you just get totally immersed, enveloped by sound, and it's almost like you're there. It's very, very clever. But that's his version, is it? That kind of his somethings and nothings, which gives me an idea. I first learnt about Craig, says Jason, after following a trail on the internet. Oh, they're dangerous. About Japanese cafes, called Kissetens. Craig walked the Nakasendo Trail and visited these cafes along the way and produced a fantastic book about it. Oh, do you know, that's a kind of a dream project, isn't it, or assignment? It really is. Check out the production of the book. It talks about how the third edition of the book came to be. I will, definitely. Thank you, Jason, who ends with, give Barney a cuddle from me. I will give him a cuddle, Jason. He's been a bit under the weather this week. Oh, bless him. He got a dog bug that's been going around. And I know he's not too well because he hasn't stolen my Crocs all week. Usually it's, where's that gone? Where's this gone? Where's that gone? As for Craig Mod, well, rabbit hole alert, walks and sounds and pictures and contemplation. Yes, it's what we're all about, and it was wonderful to see somebody else embracing that as well. Paul Sanders, of course, is one of my absolute, with Discover still, it's one of my absolute favourite photographers in the whole world, and of course his website and the work that he produces. One day, I'm saving up, one day I'm going to buy a great thumping big picture of Paul's, and I'll even build a wall for it. That's how much I like his work. And then, within our Zoom at the start of the year, we had, I'm going to call it an open mic moment, which happens every single meeting that we have now, where I asked which photographers inspired our members. And we got quite a few answers, so I'll play a few in during the months to come, but let's start with a name that you'll be familiar with here as a guest.
Without a doubt, Sean Tucker. And the reason for that is I am very much an introvert. So many people that are in street photography, it's all about being an extrovert, get out there, interact with people. And hearing Sean's perspective on that has been a huge influence on me.
The photographer that inspires me is Edward Basinski, because his pictures a lot of his pictures look really beautiful, and then you look at them and you see actually they're representing the human impact on the landscape, and it really gives you food for thought.
I'll be cheeky and I'll say there's three. There's Nikut, so the young girl running down the street, the Vietnamese girl, Steve McCurry with the Afghan girl, and a friend of mine's father who really took photographs when I was in South Africa, Ian Urquhart. He took some amazing photographs of the apartheid era in South Africa. So they basically all sort of have something to do with the beauty of the world and the terrors of the world.
I'm inspired by Vivian Mayer. I've got the book published about street photography. What I find very interesting is she had a secret hidden talent. Nobody knew about her. She was discovered purely by accident. A set of circumstances came together. And I just wanted to read a snippet from the introduction of this book written by John Maloof, where he talks about Mayer's intense privacy and lack of confidence in her own photographic prowess, which makes me think of the contrast to today's mass sharing, but still this imposter syndrome that many of us suffer with. But now she's known globally.
Our patrons talking about those photographers that inspire them. As for Craig Mod, well, I've reached out to him and hopefully he'll come on as a guest. Fingers crossed. As for Patreon members, because it'd be amiss of me not to mention, membership starts at a few bucks or pounds and a bit per month, and makes all the difference every single month. To thank our fantastic community, we do meet on Zoom and we share our pictures and our stories, which you can see on the website on the picture post tab, which is new. And each week you get an extra diary episode if you're a patron called More at the weekend. And every now and then, not too often, but every now and then a midweek snippet too. And you can find the Patreon page through the photographydaily.show website. The sun keeps coming in and out here, and I was chortling away to you there, chatting away to you, bimbling, our friend Mally calls it. Is it bimble? Bimble? Is that what he calls having a chat, having a bimble? And the sun's gone back in, and I really want to... Oh, it's come out again. Are you teasing me now? It's gone back in. Out, in, out. I just want to get this lovely picture of this path here that I'm walking along. It is a something and nothing. It's a sketchbook image. But it's just wonderful that the sun sort of streams through the trees here. Like a spotlight from the clouds that bursts through the clouds. It's not doing it now. I'll try and capture it in a moment for you. So to your letters. Well, I like... Many people have spent the week looking at the news again with with a 3-letter word always at the forefront of my mind. WHY. Why? I found it impossible, as I'm going to now, to remain perfectly neutral. As I said last week, I do have the luxury of being able to editorialise. We're not an impartial broadcaster, which, at the time of penning some thoughts and collating letters from the Photowalk, that abhorrent act where a hospital, a maternity hospital, for heaven's sakes, and a children's ward were bombed, and that had just literally filed on the news, and we had a very, very quiet evening meal. I really felt affected by I'm sure you did as well. I really felt affected by those pictures. I mean, it's not like we don't see pictures like this. In the last 20, 30 years in particular, with rolling news, I'm not quite sure what to say or how to vocalise it. The disinformation files, as they're now called, which Russian government officials may use to, and here's another 3-letter word, con good, admirable, hard-working, honest, but simply misdirected people of their country to believe these acts are all being done for a greater good. Well, that is frankly baffling me. As I said last week, I just don't get it, and I get it even less this week than I got last week. But we did get some feedback that I wanted to read from you about last week's show after speaking with our 3 photographic guests who were based between Kyiv and Lviv between them. And Michael Honkomp started it. Your description, Neil, of feeling impotent about the pandemic early days and now with the invasion of Ukraine, well, that sums it up so well. I feel like I've been in that mode for 2+ years now. Humanity has been challenging to be part of lately. Luckily, we have our creative outlet of photography and so many amazing stories you get to uncover and share. Peter Foote wrote another very powerful episode, especially following Joel the previous week. I've pre-ordered the Ukrainian Books Not Tanks publication, and I'm really looking forward to reading it and supporting the people of that country. Let's hope this utter madness ends very soon, from Peter. And from Jezza on the website, how to follow last week's interview with Joel. Surely only a fireside chat with Sebastião Salgado would do. No, this was what was needed, though. The power of photography to communicate and enlighten in the darkest depths of humanity may be the most important episode so far. Anna McCarthy, so many thought-provoking first-hand messages from these brave photographers in the field. Morten Jensen, fantastic, vital show. In general, I agree that the show should be politically neutral, but the war in Ukraine certainly deserves all the attention it can get. I literally sat on my sofa non-stop for 1 hour and 50 minutes to fully concentrate on every word said. There were other comments and thoughts and DMs and letters, but not everyone agreed with the tone of the show. Here is one from Robert L. Neil, I've been a listener for a while and enjoy the guests and thought that's invested in the podcast, but the episode about Ukraine troubled me. Whilst understanding to a degree the complexity of this human disaster, I certainly don't claim to be an oracle on this subject. I wonder whether your episode had an uncomfortable air of tokenism about it. I feel awkward writing these words, but it's important to understand that this is a layered problem, and I felt you didn't observe this. I remain a listener and understand how emotionally and mentally this is a difficult subject. Yours, Robert. There we go. Differing thoughts about that show. I appreciate all your words and on it, and I'm sure we'll have more to say on the topic in the weeks to come. For me, well, on this show at least, it's important to recognise, I think, what's going on, because we are a show that talks about emotion. We're an emotional bunch, us lot, aren't we? And, we may well return to the subject of photography and photographers in Ukraine as the weeks and months stretch out in front of us. So I do find it strange when some folks say people are getting battle weary with the news already, mainly because it's, we're coming into our 3rd week of this, and that seems emotively disconnected to me. It's a very difficult one, isn't it? Balance, When you watch a father touching the window of a train taking his family away while he stays to face God knows what. I mean, if it happened in our countries, yours, mine, we were suffering from this, we'd want to know that others were listening, wouldn't we? Not just practicing easy listening. Balance, balance, balance. It is tricky, but let me play a few words from my guests of last week. Mark Neville, who's in Lviv right now with his partner, came away and out of Kiev. Mikhail Palinchak and Wolfgang Schwan, who are still, as I believe they are anyway, still in Kiev, making pictures about what's going on.
Thursday the 24th, I was woken up by the sound of an explosion and then sirens, and I got up, went outside, had a walk around, switched on, the internet, and immediately I knew something was wrong. The internet kept on coming in and out, and then I saw some reports, and then I spent the day with my partner trying to decide what to do and whether we should go or stay. And even right from the get-go, many hundreds of thousands of people had decided if the war did begin that they would leave. There had been quite a big build-up to this invasion, as you know.
When you see the news that one country put sanctions into Russia, other country gives Ukrainian weapon, you understand that yes, Western world support us. Yeah. But you feel this when you receive 100 messages from unknown person on Instagram or Facebook with support, with asking how we can help you personally.
I haven't made a decision yet on if I would stay in that situation. Part of me is a little bit, there's an apprehension to stay, because if you do get encircled and then they decide they're going to escalate rocket attacks or send in thermobaric missiles, then it's a bad situation to be in.
Words from the photographers, Mark, Mikhail and Wolfgang, and thank you for your thoughts on the subjects that we covered in last week's, or they covered in last week's show. And it's a topic that clearly we'll return to, I'm sure. It's the Friday Photo Walk. Thank you for joining us. We know that, Neil. We've been here now for quite a while with you today on your walk. Well, I'd like to remind you, we take a walk out in the countryside usually for me, although I am thinking about, I would have been doing a city one this week. The plan was to make my photo walk in London, but for reasons that will become clear on tomorrow's More episode, those plans had to somewhat change. More on the more, if that makes sense, tomorrow. I've been meaning to feature some work from a very good friend of the show, Kelly Mitchell, and I need to do this before the lakes where she walks in Canada land thaw and summer makes the pictures, well, spring first, of course, makes the pictures I'm about to talk about something of the past for another season at least. Mind you, in Alberta, I mean, you get super freezes, don't you? -30, which is frankly unreasonable. Certainly, I would need the thickest of my thick coats that I have. I do have one which the kids don't like at all. They say it makes me look like the Michelin Man. The Michelin Man, Neil, how old is that as an advert? Some people will know exactly what I'm talking about there. But I noticed in Norway land, a few weeks ago when I was there, that fishing through the ice on the lake I was next to, ice skating on it, even one car, small car granted, driving across it, seemed par for the course. I tentatively, very tentatively, stepped out onto one very, very small part before finding my senses in terms of walking on my own and being clueless about how thick the ice was. And, of course, in my mind being 15 kilos more than my fighting weight, which I think I've mentioned before. But had I been braver and more clued up, yeah, I'd have walked straight out there and it would have been a fascinating photo walk, me crossing the lake like Bambi in a Disney cartoon. I probably didn't have the footwear for it, but there were some great sights. Talk about solace, or solitude. But our friend Kelly, well, she's been walking on ice, photographing methane bubbles, or methane bubbles, as you would say, wouldn't you, Kelly? It's a tomato thing. But I'm sharing these pictures that you've sent in on the show page today. They are gorgeous. They really are fantastic. But I might need to fill you in with some geography field trip notes before I read Kelly's letter, so you understand exactly what I'm talking about here with these methane bubble pictures that I've posted today. Sit up straight, class. Mitchell, stop chewing. And if you use your phone again to post on TikTok, I'm sending a letter home. Right, are you sitting straight? Yes, Abraham Lake in Alberta's David Thompson country is the largest reservoir in the province. Water is backed up behind the Bighorn Dam, which was built in 1972 on the North Saskatchewan's river. Have I said that correctly? Yes, I think you have, Neil. Good. There is a fascinating phenomenon that happens every single winter when methane gas bubbles derived from below get trapped in the ice on the lake. This creates wonderful patterns and effects in the ice. Effectively, what you do is you look down into the ice and you see these extraordinary patterns. The Abraham Lake bubbles are thought to be derived from decomposing organic material submerged when the reservoir was filling. There could also be a component derived from natural gas, of which Alberta has plenty, seeping through the rocks underlying Abraham Lake. Irrespective of the source, you can see successive layers of methane ice bubbles trapped as the ice thickens. There we go, class. Relax again. And here's Kelly Mitchell's letter to go with these fabulous pictures. Good morning, Neil. Attached to some of the photographs from the last trip to Abraham Lake for the season. The nice warm weather we had in February has degraded the ice and the bubbles. However, the bubbles have burst, creating some very interesting patterns in the ice that really look like flowers, and they do. It's extraordinary. I tell you what, this is a place to go and visit, isn't it? Definitely. Am I choosing the Sonoran Desert with all those ways to meet your maker? Or am I walking out across an icy lake with some of the dangers that presents as well? I don't know. Choose one or the other, Neil. What are you going to do next year? Tempted to do both, really. Take care. Have a great weekend from Kelly. These pictures, Kelly, they're superb. I'll share them on the show page, as I said a couple of times. These methane bubbles that you see below the ice, they usually, the way I've described them, and I described them in our Patreon meetup when we saw some pictures, the way I described them is, if you imagine these kinds of upside down piles of stones, round stones, the sort that you build on stone beaches that usually get knocked over by somebody who probably used to pull wings off flies in his youth. They're beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So send your Photowalk pictures, like Kelly has done, to studio@photographydaily.show. 2,000 pixels on the long side, please. Right, are we ready for the second part of my conversation with my guest this week? Let's rejoin Daniel Bergeron talking about the power of the portrait. Your portraits, Daniel, well, you work quite close, exceptionally close actually, with people. Your photographs are very intimate. Is that something that's developed, or have you always been like that? Again, that comes back to problem solving. Is that oftentimes when I do go on location, I have to work backwards from the amount of space I'm given, which is usually not much. I think the most I've ever seen, I got a room that was 13 feet by 15 feet. And it's just, okay, you get this, these are the dimensions of the room, and these are how many electrical outlets you get. Figure something out so that you can do groups and solos. Ah, so these intimate portraits then come from the requirement to work in these tiny rooms sometimes? Somewhat. The real constraint aside, the other constraints aside from space is how much gear I can fly with. Yeah. But generally, my whole idea of lighting
as you can see from a lot of the work I have, I tend to have one kind of center hit on the face, and then everything else is just contrast control. And that could be, strips from the front, or I have a large Allen Chrome Octabank that can also fly in. So I'm going in with a little more than one light. Usually I might have if I'm doing a blown out white background, then, I'll have a few more heads in play. But portrait lighting is usually about three lights for me.
Many of these people, and I'll stay with the celebs just for this, such as Glenn Close, since I mentioned her, will have a pretty good idea of how to present themselves to camera. And this is what I was thinking about when you said camera aware. They've been in front of the camera for decades. What do you as a celeb photographer feel you have to bring to the party in those moments? Because you want to show their personality, but they've got a pretty good way of how they want to project themselves.
The funny thing is that I expected that going into it, but most, when it comes to a still photo, not that much different than folks off the street. It's still the same kind of, roll on up and you've got the same kind of window. And maybe it comes part and parcel to working so close, because my two main lenses, depending on which camera I'm shooting. If I'm shooting my Canon, that's my 100 macro, or if I'm on my Hasselblad, then it's 120 macro. But both cases, I could almost reach out and touch it. I try to stay close because, again, I like, or not to go off on a weird tangent, but from back of my old days of working in film labs and hanging E6, like one of the things I used to love was we actually had people in San Diego that shot 8x10 transparency, and having that come out of the dip and dunk and just that ultra fine resolution. And then going from that and then to the early days of digital where high resolution was just not a thing. So to have that now and have that level of detail when I pull the image up on the screen is something I still just enjoy about the craft of it.
By admission, you can be a shy photographer, which is a juxtaposition when you think of those you meet. For you though, what's the most exhilarating thing about your genre, being a portrait photographer?
Personally, it's just when what's in your head goes to final art.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is it. This is exactly the technique I was nailing for. Focus is dead on. Like everything just comes into place. Yeah. And you have a piece of final art that is exactly what you wanted.
Looking past the celebs and the musicians, in your people collection, I saw Erin, the doctor, who looked like she'd completed a 24-hour. Still the mask indentations on her face. As I was looking at the picture, I thought, well, what's your story?
So that's my wife.
Ah, right. I should have recognized her because your wife appears a lot in your Instagram, but I didn't see her as your wife. Isn't that interesting?
And that's and again, that kind of plays into my life getting better.
What was the story behind that picture when it was made?
Well, obviously with what we've had the past few years and our last president completely dropping the ball on COVID response. She's an urgent care physician and was already working at a very high volume clinic, averaging 120 patients a day between two doctors. Whoa. And then this happened. And it just got to a point where, and again, in the early days before vaccine was out, I'm on immunosuppressive therapy. So we didn't know how that was going to, if I was at an increased risk. Yeah. She was worried about bringing it home because this is something new. So there's that stress. And she cranks out on average 14 to 15 hour days.
Wow.
And they peaked at the December, right before the vaccine came out, they peaked at 213 patients in one day working in a parking lot in the rain. And this was just one of those days where, we had a routine when she got home. Basically, I could tell when she got home, when the garage door closed, that's when it's turn on the shower for the hot water to come up. And then, she would basically had a laundry basket in the garage to strip down to, and then head straight to the shower to make sure everything, like there was no risk of contamination in the house. But one of those days, it was just as soon as she got home, I had a little basement studio before I signed this lease. So it was just come down right now, take a mask off, shoot, and then go do your thing.
I mean, I can see the tiredness in her face. That's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah. I would imagine this proves it really. You're never really off duty as a portrait photographer. Everyone is a story. Everyone is a portrait.
And I try not. And it's just, I try to keep it going. It's mostly, especially now as we're coming up on, we're planning on retiring in a few years, but there's a constant pressure to produce.
Yeah.
There's I don't know if it's just part and parcel to the industry as a whole or just being in Los Angeles, but there's this constant, like, you are only as good as the job you're doing right now. That's something that might be worth an episode in itself. Is just, there's been a long-term struggle to not internalize things when business gets slow or when you've done a good thing. And then now there's this interim period where things are kind of slow and you're trying to pull something new together, or it took a long time for me to learn how to not internalize that as some kind of personal deep failure as a person.
Did you have that issue then to start with?
A lot. That's something that my wife helped me with, because throughout much of my adult life, particularly, I don't know how much the libertarian thing goes over in the UK, but we have a lot of that here. And big time, a lot of it, I mentioned growing up poor and how that shapes you.
Yeah.
In my own family, it was, they'd start with an honorable thing of, if you're unhappy with your station in life, work your way out of it. But it's taken as an absolute that you think the world's a meritocracy, and you will, if you just apply yourself and work, then you'll beat anything and you'll rise out of it. And the idea is that if you're not making it, then somehow you have failed. And it doesn't take into account that, say out here, there is the luck end of it, or there is the what you're born into. It's the idea that, I could go out there, again, I started from scratch, and I did get I had just had one lucky chance meeting that turned it all around for me. But had I not got that, I'd probably still be assisting. And I did have to, and I'm not discounting the hard work. You have to be competent. You do have to work hard enough to take advantage of luck when you get it. But there are plenty of talented people out here. I mean, talented is the bare minimum out here.
Yeah.
But unless you just happen to be at the right place at the right time, a lot of people will never see that. And it's very easy to, again, see this as some kind of personal shortcoming or something that I did not apply myself in the proper way, or I didn't do the right thing. And then you get the depression, and it's easy to fall into that trap.
I'm intrigued to know who you would choose to shoot your portrait.
Living or dead?
All right, you can have one living, one dead.
I mean, if I'm going with just Bailey's still alive, right?
Yeah, Bailey.
Yes. Okay.
Bailey's still alive.
Yes, if we can edit that.
Yeah, last I looked, Daniel.
I'd go for Bailey, living, Avedon, and deceased.
Yeah, I'm glad we got that the right way round. By the way, with your DIY skills, I have to ask this question because it did make me, smile for the wrong reasons, I might say. Did you manage to weld yourself an anti-theft device for your catalytic converter on the van? I was worried.
Yes, I did.
You lost it 57 weeks ago. You haven't lost it again, have you?
I have not. Yes, it's worked so far as a deterrent. That was expensive, and that's been a thing out here. It cost me $1,500.
I know. I saw it. Yeah. I sensed your anguish.
That's the DIY thing I enjoy just because, again, having grown up poor, you have to make do. And now that I have the money for tools and just that need to stay busy and producing something, so I make stuff, make furniture, make whatever I can, and just make do. I've told folks that we're starting out in photography, like one of the best things you can get on the cheap is sheets of 4x8 foam core.
All right.
The black on one side, white on the other.
Yep.
You can do so much with that. Make bookends, a lot of light control. You can do your blown out white backgrounds. You can cut light out, use them like barn doors. You can buy space blankets. Those little cheap space blankets from Mylar blankets from the camp store. Spray mount it to some foam board, and you got basically a Matthews shiny board that you can get a friend to hold out, and it doesn't cost you that much. There's just one of those little things that you can make work with what you've got.
My thanks to my guest this week, Daniel Bergeron, and of course I'll link to his website on the show page today. My pictures that I've made today while I've been out on my walk, I've not actually made a lot of pictures with you. I've been making them while we've been listening to the interview together. Sort of. That's what it feels like anyway. But I have made some pictures. But I'm not greatly inspired today. I've been making pictures of the trees that have fallen in along this path as I've been walking in the recent Storm Eunice. So you'll find those on the show page as well. I tuck them down at the bottom for you, just so you can see where where I've been walking, and it's really important to see the pictures of where you've been walking. That's what gives me a little jump for joy. No, that doesn't sound right. It's just it's joyous to receive them. So send them in to studio@photographydaily.show, please. 2,000 pixels on the wide side. They can be colour or black and white, square, landscape, portrait. Just not circular, please. It's always a bit tricky doing circular pictures. Although we've done it, we did do it recently, didn't we? Yeah, we did. So for links to our guest and other photographers that we've mentioned, plus pictures from your photo walks, follow the link that's in the podcast player app, which will take you to today's show page nicely. If you are a patron, it's the More Show tomorrow, and I'll tell you what's on that after the play-out song that we have. The song, if you're new around these parts, that we play towards the right at the end of the show, just to keep us entertained as we make those final few pictures from our walk that we've been making today. And this week's play-out song is from Ronit. And you know what? I've only gone and found a song called Solace, which you know is one of my favourite words when describing some of the quieter and more contemplative pictures that I happen across. It's quite a different kind of tune as well. Sort of with vocals and sort of without, which gives it, this haunting solace. So it does. And as you listen to it, I want to introduce something else new this week. You must have been on holiday, Neil, doing all these new things. You've been thinking too much, maybe. But it's just something small, a postscript to the show, because we talk in letter language, don't we? In letters. So a PS. And the PS to our letters that we've been reading today, if you like. A special friend of the show actually provides our very first PS to our walk today. That's Lynn Fraser, who sent me it can be quotes and little thoughts that we dig out. She sent me some quotes actually, and I think this is a good PS from Mina White, an American photographer and educator, and actually philosopher, definitely one of our art form's great thinkers, without a doubt, who made these black and white, wonderful black and white pictures and prints of architecture and landscapes and studies of men, portraits of men. And actually, if you look at pictures of Mina White, he is what Robbie Williams will look like, I think, in later life. But today's PS, as we float into solace, every photograph is a self-portrait. Definitely agree with that. Solace from Ronit. And that's it for this week. My thanks to Daniel Bergeron and all those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website photographydaily.show. And for those wonderful supporters who are, tomorrow is the More Diary Show. It's your own weekend oasis of a little extra for your kind support. And we're going to be talking about finding a photo passion, some more. Picture Post, the feature and the magazine. We hear 5 things I love about photography from John Kenny, and why Salgado for me was Salgargon. If you like the music you hear and the production sound, well, it comes from the incredible artlist.io, and you'll find a link in the website menu. If you make films or slideshows or podcasts that need emotive music, it's who I use. By clicking on the link on our site, you help us a little with our music costs too. Links and further research to what you've heard will be on the show page today, and you'll find a handy link too in your podcast player app. And I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.